What about just the simple, and for people who don't know, one of the things that iRobot has created is the Roomba vacuum cleaner. What about the simple robot that is the Roomba, quote unquote, simple, that's deployed in tens of millions of homes? What do you think about that?
Well, I make the joke that I started out life as a pure mathematician and turned into a vacuum cleaner salesman. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, be ready
That's
be
exactly.
ready
I
to
mean,
do anything. But I was, there was a wacky lawsuit that I got deposed for not too many years ago, and I was the only one who had email from the 1990s.
mhm.
And no one in the company had it, so I went through my email, and it reminded me of the joy of what we were doing, and what was I doing? What was I doing at the time we were building um, building the Roomba? One of the things was we had this incredibly tight budget because we wanted to put it on the shelves at $200. There was another home cleaning robot at the time. It was the Electrolux Trilobite, which sold for €2,000. And to us, that was not going to be a consumer product.
Mhm.
So we had reason to believe that $200 was a thing that people would buy at. That was our aim. But that meant we had, that's on the shelf making profit. That means the cost of goods has to be minimal. So I find all these emails of me going, I'd be in Taipei for a MIT meeting, and I'd stay a few extra days. I'd go down to Hsinchu and talk to these little tiny companies, lots of little tiny companies outside of TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, which let all these little companies be fabless. They didn't have to have their own fab, so they could innovate. And they were building, their innovations were to build stripped down 6802s. 6802 was what was in an Apple One. Get rid of half the silicon and still have it be viable. And I'd previously got some of those for some earlier failed products of iRobot. And that was in Hong Kong, going to all these companies that built, they weren't gaming in the current sense. There were these handheld games that you would play, or birthday cards, because we had about a 50-cent budget for computation. So I'm trekking from place to place, looking at their chips, looking at what they'd removed. Their interrupt handling is too weak for a general purpose. So I was going deep technical detail. And then I found this one from a company called Winbond, which had, and I'd forgotten it had this much RAM. It had 512 bytes of RAM, and it was in our budget, and it had all the capabilities we needed.
Yeah.
So,
and you were excited.
yeah, and I was reading all these emails. Colin, I found this. So,
Did you ever think that you guys could be so successful? Like eventually this company would be so successful. Could you possibly have imagined?
No, we never did think that. We'd had 14 failed business models up till 2002, and then we had 2 winners the same year. No, and then I remember the board, because by this time we had some venture capital in. The board went along with us building some robots for aiming at the Christmas 2002 market, and we went 3 times over what they authorized and built 70,000 of them and sold them all in that first, because we released on September 18th, and they were all sold by Christmas. So it was so we were gutsy, but
but yeah, you didn't think this will take over the world. Well, this is so a lot of amazing robotics companies have gone under over the past few decades. Why do you think it's so damn hard to run a successful
there's
robotics company?
There's a few things. One is expectations of capabilities by the founders that are off base.
The founders, not the consumer, the founders.
Yeah, expectations of what can be delivered.
Sure.
Mispricing, and what a customer thinks is a valid price is not rational necessarily.
Yeah.
And expectations of the customers. And just the sheer hardness of getting people to adopt a new technology. And I've suffered from all three of these. I've had more failures than successes in terms of companies. I've suffered from all three. So
do you think one day there will be a robotics company, and by robotics company, I mean where your primary source of income is from robots, that will be a $1 trillion+ company? And if so, what would that company do?
I can't, because I'm still starting robot companies.
Yeah.
I'm not making any such predictions in my own mind. I'm not thinking about a $1 trillion company. And by the way, I don't think, in the 90s, anyone was thinking that Apple would ever be a $1 trillion company. So these are very hard to predict.
But sorry to interrupt, but don't you, because I kind of have a vision in a small way, a big vision in a small way, that I see that there will be robots in the home at scale, like Roomba, but more, and that's $1 trillion.
Right, and I think there's a real market pull for them because of the demographic inversion. Who's going to do all the stuff for the older people? Mm-hmm. There's too many. I'm leading here. there's going to be too many of us, and but we don't have capable enough robots to make that economic argument at this point. Do I expect that will happen? Yes, I expect it will happen. But I got to tell you, we introduced the Roomba in 2002, and I stayed another 9 years. We were always trying to find what the next home robot would be, and still today, the primary product of 20 years later, almost 20 years later, 19 years later, the primary product is still the Roomba. So iRobot hasn't found the next one.
Do you think it's possible for one person in the garage to build it versus like Google launching Google self-driving car that turns into Waymo? Do you think it's this is almost like what it takes to build a successful robotics company? Do you think it's possible to go from the ground up, or is it just too much capital investment?
Yeah, so it's very hard to get there without a lot of capital. And we're starting to see, fair chunks of capital for some robotics companies. Series B's, I just saw one yesterday for $80 million, I think it was, for Covariant. But it can take real money to get into these things, and you may fail along the way. I certainly failed at Rethink Robotics, and we lost $150 million in capital there.
So Rethink Robotics is another amazing robotics company you co-founded. So what was the vision there? What was the dream? And what are you most proud of with Rethink Robotics?
I'm most proud of the fact that we got robots out of the cage in factories that was safe, absolutely safe for people and robots to be next to each other.
So these are robotic arms.
Robotics arms.
They're able to pick up stuff and interact with humans.
Yeah, and that the humans could retask them without writing code.
Right.
And now that's sort of become an expectation for a lot of other little companies and big companies are advertising they're doing.
That's both an interface problem and also a safety problem.
Yeah. So I'm most proud of that. I let myself be talked out of what I wanted to do. And, you've always got, I can't replay the tape. I can't replay it. Maybe I, if I'd been stronger and I remember the day, I remember the exact meeting.
Can you take me through that meeting?
Yeah. So I'd set as a target for the company that we were going to build $3,000 robots with force feedback that were safe for people to be around.
Wow.
That was my goal. And we built, so we started in 2008, and we had prototypes built of plastic gearboxes, and at a $3,000, lifetime, or $3,000, I was saying we're going to go after not the people who already have robot arms in factories, the people who would never have a robot arm. We're going to go after a different market, so we don't have to meet their expectations. And so we're going to build it out of plastic. It doesn't have to have a 35,000 hour lifetime. It's going to be so cheap that it's OPEX, not CAPEX. And so we had a prototype that worked reasonably well, but the control engineers were complaining about these plastic gearboxes with a beautiful little planetary gearbox that we could use something called series elastic actuators. We embedded them in there. We could measure forces. We knew when we hit something, etc. The control engineers were saying, yeah, but there's this torque ripple, because these plastic gears, they're not great gears, and there's this ripple, and trying to do force control around this ripple is so hard. And I'm not going to name names, but I remember one of the mechanical engineers saying, we'll just build a metal gearbox with spur gears, and it'll take 6 weeks, we'll be done, problem solved. 2 years later, we got the spur gearbox working.
Yeah.
We cost reduced it every possible way we could. But now the price went up to, and then the CEO at the time said, well, we have to have 2 arms, not 1 arm. So our first robot product, Baxter, now costs $25,000. And the only people who were going to look at that were people who had arms in factories, because that was somewhat cheaper for 2 arms than arms in factories. But they were used to 0.1 millimeter reproducibility of motion and certain velocities. And I kept saying, but that's not what we're giving you. You don't need position repeatability. You use force control like a human does. No, but we want that repeatability. We want that repeatability. That's, all the other robots have that repeatability. Why don't you have that repeatability?
So can you clarify? Force controls, you can grab the arm and you can move it.
Well, you can move it around. But suppose you, can you see that?
Yes.
Suppose you want to.
Yes.
Suppose this thing is a precise thing that's got to fit here in this right angle.
Yeah.
Under position control, you have fixtured where this is. You know where this is precisely, and you just move it. And it goes there. If force control, you would do something like slide it over here till we feel that, and slide it in there.
Gotcha.
And that's how a human gets precision.
Yeah.
They use force feedback.
Yes.
And get the things to mate rather than just go straight to it.
Yeah.
Couldn't convince our customers who were in factories and were used to thinking about things a certain way. And they wanted it. So then we said, okay, we're going to build an arm that gives you that. So now we ended up building a $35,000 robot with 1 arm with, what are they called? A certain sort of gearbox made by a company whose name I can't remember right now, but it's the name of the gearbox. But it's got torque ripple in it. So now there was an extra 2 years of solving the problem of doing the force with the torque ripple. So we had to do the thing we had avoided. And for the plastic gearboxes, we ended up having to do. The robot was now overpriced, and and
that was your intuition from the very beginning, kind of, that you're opening a door to solve a lot of problems that you're eventually going to have to solve this problem anyway.
Yeah, and also I was aiming at a low price to go into a different market.
Low price
that didn't have
$3,000 would be amazing.
Yeah, I think we could have done it for $5,000. But you talked about setting the goal a little too far for the engineers.
Yeah, exactly. So why would you say that company not failed but went under?
We had buyers, and there's this thing called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., CFIUS, and that had previously been invoked twice around where the government could stop foreign money coming into a U.S. company based on defense requirements.
Mm-hmm.
We went through due diligence multiple times. We were going to get acquired, but every consortium had Chinese money in it, and all the bankers would say at the last minute, this isn't going to get past CFIUS, and the investors would go away. And then we had two buyers. Once we were about to run out of money, two buyers. And one used heavy-handed legal stuff with the other one, said they were going to take it and pay more, dropped out when we were out of cash, and then bought the assets at 1/30th of the price they had offered a week before. It was a tough week.
Do you, does it hurt to think about like an amazing company that didn't, like iRobot didn't find a way?
Yeah, it was tough. I said I was never going to start another company. I was pleased that everyone liked what we did so much that the team was hired by 3 companies within a week. Everyone had a job in one of these 3 companies. Some stayed in their same desks because another company came in and rented the space. So I felt good about people not being out on the street.
So Baxter has a screen with a face. That's a revolutionary idea for a robot manipulation, like for a robotic arm. How much opposition did you get?
Well, first, the screen was also used during codeless programming, where you taught by demonstration. It showed you what its understanding of the task was. So it had 2 roles. Some customers hated it, and so we made it so that when the robot was running, it could be showing graphs of what was happening and not show the eyes. Other people, and some of them surprised me who they were saying, well, this one doesn't look as human as the old one. We like the human looking.
Yeah.
So there was a mixed bag there.
But do you think that's, I don't know. I'm kind of disappointed whenever I talk to roboticists, like the best robotics people in the world. They seem to not want to do the eyes type of thing. Like they seem to see it as a machine as opposed to a machine that can also have a human connection. I'm not sure what to do with that. It seems like a lost opportunity. I think the $1 trillion company will have to do the human connection very well, no matter what it does.
Yeah, I agree.